The Montana Territory stretched endlessly beneath a merciless August sun. Its grasslands burned to the color of old leather, along the wagon trail that cut through this desolate expanse. Bleached cattle bones jutted from the earth like tombstones, marking the passage of those who had gambled against the wilderness and lost. The wind carried more dust than promise, and when it howled through the canyons at night, it sounded like the voices of the dead. Nell Hart stood in the doorway of her cabin, watching the sun sink behind the jagged horizon. At 23, she had already buried both parents in the small plot behind the woodshed, victims of the fever that had swept through the territory 2 winters past. Her hands, once soft from her mother's care, were now calloused from splitting wood and hauling water. The skin was cracked and weathered, but they were steady hands, capable hands. The cabin wasn't much 2 rooms built from rough-hewn logs, chinked with mud and straw, but it was hers, and she'd defended it against claim jumpers, wolves, and the crushing loneliness that pressed in from all sides when the prairie wind died down. She had developed simple routines to keep the darkness at bay: a short prayer at dawn, counting the kernels of seed corn, checking her meager supplies before the sun dipped below the horizon. She was about to close the door against the gathering dusk when she heard it, the thunder of hooves, too many and too fast for ordinary travel. Nell's hand moved instinctively to the rifle propped against the doorframe. Out here, unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. The riders materialized from the dust cloud like specters, 5 men pushing their horses hard. Even in the failing light, she could see the foam on the animals' flanks, the wild roll of their eyes. These men had been riding as if the devil himself gave chase. "Miss Hart!" The lead rider's voice cracked with urgency. She recognized him, Buck Morrison, a grizzled trail hand with a gray beard that reached his chest. He'd bought supplies from her father years ago. "We need help. Bad hurt man here." 2 riders dismounted, struggling to support a figure slumped between them. Blood, black in the twilight, soaked through the man's shirt and dripped steadily onto the dusty ground. His head lolled back, revealing a strong jaw shadowed with several days' growth. Even unconscious, there was something commanding about him. "This here's Cole Archer," Buck said, his weathered face etched with worry. "Best trail boss in the territory. Got ambushed 10 miles back, bullet through the chest. Maybe a broke spear tip still in there. Lost too much blood already." Nell's mind raced. She could turn them away. It would be the safe choice. A young woman alone, nursing a strange man, would set every gossip's tongue wagging from here to Fort Benton. But as she looked at the unconscious man, saw the labored rise and fall of his chest, she thought of her mother's words, "We choose who we are by what we do when it matters most." "Bring him inside," she said, stepping back from the door. "Put him on my mother's bed. You." She pointed to the youngest rider, barely more than a boy. "Get a fire going in the stove. Hot water, lots of it. And you." She nodded to another. "There's clean rags in the chest by the window. Bring them all." They carried Cole Archer into the cabin with the reverence usually reserved for the dead, as they laid him on the bed. Nell got her first clear look at his injuries in the lamplight. The bullet wound in his left chest wept steadily, the flesh around it swollen and angry. But there was more. His shoulder bore the marks of being dragged, the skin abraded raw. "How long ago?" she asked, already reaching for her mother's medicine box. 6 hours, maybe 7, Buck replied. "We rode hard as we could." "Too long. Infection would already be setting in." Nell's hands moved with practiced efficiency, drawing on every lesson her mother had taught her about frontier doctoring. Yarrow for bleeding, willow bark for fever, grain alcohol for cleaning wounds. She had precious little of each. "I need to clean this wound and see how deep it goes," she said, rolling up her sleeves. "It's going to be ugly work." Buck nodded grimly, setting a small leather pouch on the table. Coins clinked inside. "That's all we got between us. The herd's got to move on, winter's coming and we're already behind. But Cole, he's a good man. Miss Hart, best I ever rode with. Nell barely glanced at the money. I'm not doing this for pay. Then why? The question came from the boy who'd built the fire. She looked down at Cole Archer's face, peaceful despite his body's struggle. Because I can, she said simply. Now, all of you need to clear out. This is no place for a crowd. Buck hesitated. You sure you'll be safe? Cole's got enemies. The ambush. I've got my father's rifle and know how to use it. Nell interrupted. Your presence here will only draw more attention. Go, take care of your herd. One by one, the men filed out, each touching their hat brims in respect. Buck was the last to leave. I'll pray for you both, he said. Cole's strong. If anyone can pull through. He didn't finish the thought, but Nell heard what he didn't say. The odds were long, and they both knew it. As the sound of hooves faded into the night, Nell turned back to her patient. The lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls as she worked, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt with her mother's sewing scissors. The wound was worse than she'd feared, ragged and deep, already showing signs of putrefaction around the edges. She heated her father's skinning knife until it glowed red, knowing what had to be done. The infected tissue would have to be cut away, burned clean. Her hands trembled for just a moment before steadying. There was no room for fear. Not now. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin's simple door. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled a lonely, mournful sound that seemed to echo her own isolation. But Nell didn't allow herself to dwell on it. She had work to do. Through that first long night, she fought for Cole Archer's life. She cleaned and dressed the wound, forced water between his cracked lips, and kept vigil as his fever climbed. He muttered in his delirium, calling for someone named Ethan, crying out warnings about not shooting toward the women's tent, mixing English with what sounded like Crow or Cheyenne words. By dawn, Nell was exhausted, but Cole still breathed. She had done all she could for now. The rest was up to him and whatever force governed such things. She allowed herself a moment to study his face, properly strong features marked by sun and wind. A scar along his jaw that spoke of past violence. Laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he hadn't always been hard. Standing to stretch her aching back, Nell noticed dust rising on the horizon. The herd was moving on. As Buck had said they must. She was truly alone now with this stranger who might die despite her efforts. She thought of the gossip that would surely follow. Could already hear the whispers, that Hart girl, keeping a man in her house, no shame at all. But what was reputation against a human life? She'd made her choice. Taking up her knife, Nell carved a single notch into the window frame, day one of what she promised herself would be 30 days of care. If Cole Archer wasn't well enough to leave by then, she'd reassess, but for now, she had a goal, a purpose. As the morning sun painted the grassland gold, Nell Hart prepared for the battle ahead. She didn't yet know that she was beginning a journey that would transform not just 2 lives, but an entire community. She knew only that there was a man who needed help, and she had the skills to provide it. The first of 30 days had begun. The second day dawned with no change in Cole's condition. His fever raged like a prairie fire, consuming him from within. Nell had barely slept, dozing fitfully in the chair beside the bed, jerking awake each time his breathing hitched or changed rhythm. She established a routine born of necessity: boil water, clean the wound, change the bandages, apply poultices of yarrow and pine resin, lift his head to dribble water past his cracked lips. By the third morning, she found herself talking to fill the oppressive silence. My father used to say that silence was golden, she told Cole's unconscious form as she worked. But I think he never spent days alone with someone who might slip away without warning. She spoke of mundane things, the meager harvest she'd managed to bring in, her father's old harmonica gathering dust on the shelf, her horse Bramble who was all bones and stubborn spirit. Her voice was steady and warm, like a thread trying to tether him to the world of the living. She didn't know if he could hear her, but the sound seemed to calm his restless movements, so she continued. The frontier showed its harsh face during those early days. The noon sun turned the cabin into an oven, while at night the temperature plummeted until her breath misted in the air. On the fourth day, as she stepped outside to fetch water, a rattlesnake lay coiled on the doorstep, seeking shade. Her heart hammered as she used a shovel to flick it away. The serpent's rattle a sharp reminder of how quickly death could strike in this unforgiving land. Inside, Cole's condition worsened. The skin around his wound had taken on an ominous gray tinge, and pus seeped through the bandages faster than she could change them. Nell knew what had to be done. She'd watched her mother do it once, on a homesteader's child with a festering dog bite. She sharpened her father's skinning knife until it could split a hair, then held it in the fire until the blade glowed orange. Her hands trembled as she looked down at Cole, at the infected tissue that threatened to poison his entire system. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. "This is going to hurt something fierce, even through the fever." Taking a deep breath, she pressed the burning blade against the dead flesh. The smell made her stomach turn, but she worked methodically, cutting away the corruption and cauterizing as she went. Cole's body jerked and fought against the pain. Even in unconsciousness, she had to use all her strength to hold him still, finally straddling his chest to keep him from thrashing. When it was done, she collapsed in the chair, shaking, but the wound looked cleaner, the edges pinker with healthy tissue. She'd done what she could. In his delirium, Cole revealed fragments of his past. He called out for Ethan repeatedly, sometimes as a warning, sometimes as a lament. "Don't let them take the horses. Ethan," he'd mutter, or, more heartbreakingly, "I'm sorry. Little brother, I should have been there." He spoke in Crow, too, words Nell didn't understand but recognized from trading with the bands that sometimes passed through. Once, clear as day, he said, "Don't shoot toward the women's tent. There are children there." The urgency in his voice, even fever-drunk, spoke of a man who'd seen too much violence and tried to limit its scope. On the sixth day, Nell realized the old wounds on his body told their own stories. Bullet scars, knife marks, what looked like old rope burns on his wrists. This wasn't a man who'd lived a gentle life, yet his fevered ramblings revealed a conscience, a code of honor that ran deeper than the violence of his profession. She was running low on water, the small well behind the cabin beginning to show signs of running dry. It hadn't rained in weeks. Reluctantly, she saddled Bramble and made the hour-long ride to the communal well that served the scattered homesteads in the area. She'd hoped to avoid notice, but Martha Henley was there, filling her own buckets. The older woman's eyes narrowed as she took in Nell's exhausted appearance, the bloodstains on her apron she hadn't had time to wash out. "Heard you got yourself a visitor," Martha said, her tone dripping disapproval. "That no-good trail boss what got himself shot up?" "He's not no good," Nell replied quietly, focusing on filling her water barrels. "He's a man who needs help." "A man who's got no business being in an unmarried woman's home," Martha countered. "What would your poor mother think?" Nell's temper flared. "My mother would think I was doing the Christian thing, tending to the sick and wounded." "Christian thing," Martha scoffed. "Mark my words, girl. No good will come of this. That man's trouble, and you're inviting it right into your home." Nell said nothing more, but as she rode away, she could feel Martha's condemning gaze burning into her back. By evening, she knew, the whole territory would be buzzing with gossip. That night it rained a brief, violent thunderstorm that lasted less than an hour, but brought blessed relief from the heat. The cabin roof leaked in 3 places, and Nell scrambled to position buckets and pans to catch the drips. One leak was directly over Cole's bed. She ended up holding a piece of oilcloth over him, her arms aching as the water drummed against the fabric. As she sat there in the dim lamplight, rain pattering around them. She studied his face, even weathered by sun and hardship. There was something compelling about his features. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but strong, lived in. A face that had seen things, done things, survived things. When the rain stopped, she returned to her chair, exhausted. But Cole's breathing seemed easier, and when she felt his forehead, the fever had finally broken. She nearly wept with relief. The next morning brought an unwelcome visitor. Reverend Tobias Crane arrived on his ancient mule, his pinched face set in lines of disapproval. "Sister Hart," he began without preamble, "I've come to discuss your situation." "My situation is that I'm caring for a wounded man," Nell replied, not inviting him inside, "as the Good Samaritan did." The Good Samaritan didn't compromise his reputation by keeping the wounded man in his own home. The Reverend countered, "You must think of appearances, of your future. What decent man will have you after this?" Nell felt something harden inside her. "Reverend, I see two choices before me. I can preserve my reputation and let a man die, or I can stain my reputation and save a life. I know which side of that ledger I want to stand on when I meet my maker. Do you—" The Reverend's face flushed. "You're walking a dangerous path, young woman. Don't say you weren't warned." After he left, Nell found herself shaking not with fear, but with anger. She looked down at Cole, at the rise and fall of his chest that was steadier now, more certain. "You better be worth all this trouble," she told him. That evening, as she changed his bandages, she noticed improvement. The wound was beginning to close, the angry red inflammation fading. She'd kept meticulous notes in her mother's old journal fever patterns. Wound appearance, his responsiveness to different treatments. It helped her feel in control, gave structure to the endless hours of vigilance. On the 10th day, she began marking the days on the window frame with her knife. 10 notches, each one a small victory against death. 20 more to go, according to the promise she'd made herself. She didn't know why 30 days felt right, but it gave her a goal, something to work toward. As she carved that 10th notch, Cole stirred. For a moment, his eyes fluttered open, gray as a winter storm, focused on nothing. Then they closed again, but it was enough. He was fighting his way back. Nell allowed herself a small smile. "That's it," she murmured. "You keep fighting, Cole Archer. I'm not giving up on you, so don't you dare give up on yourself." Outside, the vast Montana sky stretched endlessly, indifferent to human struggles. But inside the small cabin, life persisted against the odds, tended by work-worn hands and a stubborn refusal to let death win. Days 11 and 12 brought marked improvement. The festering wound began to heal cleanly, the putrid smell replaced by the sharp scent of the pine resin Nell applied daily. She developed a morning ritual warming water on the stove, adding crushed yarrow leaves and gently bathing Cole's fevered skin. His color improved from deathly gray to merely pale, and his breathing deepened from shallow gasps to steady rhythm. As her hands moved across his chest, cleaning around the wound with practiced care, she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her palms, not the heat of fever or infection, but something else, as if the simple act of caring had awakened something dormant within her. His breathing seemed to ease under her touch, his restless movements stilling. There was no miraculous healing, no divine light, just the quiet power of human connection, of one person refusing to let another slip away. She found herself talking more freely now, filling the cabin with stories to push back the weight of silence. "My parents came here in 71 inches, she told him one morning as she worked. Papa was so sure he'd strike it rich in the goldfields. Instead, he found barely enough to buy this land and build the cabin. Mama used to say we were rich in different ways, rich in sunsets and space and freedom." She spoke of the winter they'd nearly starved, holed up beneath an overturned wagon during a 3-day blizzard, of the time she'd learned to shoot, her father's patient voice guiding her aim. "Steady now, Nell. Breathe out slow and squeeze gentle-like. These memories, shared with an unconscious man, somehow seemed more real in the telling. Cole's fevered mutterings continued, painting a picture of a complex man. He spoke of cattle drives and river crossings, of men he'd lost to swollen streams and stampedes. But there were tender moments too. He called out for his mother, asked someone named Sarah to dance, laughed at some remembered joke. On the 13th day, trouble arrived in the form of 3 riders. Nell heard them coming, horses moving slow and deliberate, the way men move when they're hunting something. She checked the load in her father's rifle and stood ready at the window. The lead rider was a thin man with dead eyes and a badge pinned crooked on his vest. Not the real sheriff. She knew Tom Bradley by sight. This was one of Pike's men, the hired guns who did the rancher's dirty work under color of law. "Open up," the man called. "We hear you're harboring a fugitive. Man named Archer is wanted for cattle theft." Nell didn't open the door. "Any man under my roof is there as a patient, not a fugitive. When he's well enough to speak for himself, he can answer your charges." "Don't make this difficult. Woman, we got orders to bring him in." "Dead or alive? I suppose." Nell's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "Well, he's closer to dead than alive right now, so dragging him out would finish the job. That what you want to murder a defenseless man?" Through the window, she saw the riders exchange glances. The thin man's hand moved toward his gun, but stopped when he spotted the rifle barrel pointing at him through the glass. "This ain't over," he warned. "Pike wants answers about his missing cattle, and he generally gets what he wants. Then Pike can come himself and ask his questions when my patient is able to answer them." Nell replied, "Now get off my land before I forget my Christian manners." They left, but she knew they'd be back. She barred the door and checked the windows, her mother's teachings about frontier defense flooding back. That night, she slept even lighter than usual, the rifle within arm's reach. The next day brought an unexpected ally. A soft knock at the door made her heart race until she heard a woman's voice. "Sister, I bring medicine." Through the window, Nell saw a young native woman, perhaps 25, carrying a baby on her back. She recognized her Toppy from the Crow Band that camped sometimes by Willow Creek. They'd traded before cloth for beadwork, flour for dried meat. Cautiously, Nell opened the door. Toppy's dark eyes took in the scene quickly, the wounded man, the medicinal supplies, Nell's exhausted face. "I hear in town," Toppy said in careful English. "Man hurt bad. You help him." She held out a leather pouch. "This for the fever poison, my grandmother's medicine. Strong." Nell accepted the gift gratefully. Inside were roots and bark she didn't recognize, along with careful gestures from Toppy showing how to prepare them. The native woman looked at Cole with interest. "This one, he speaks our language in his sleep," she said. "He lived with the people." "I don't know," Nell admitted. "He calls out in crow sometimes." Toppy nodded slowly. "He has respect, I hear this. Not all white men do." She adjusted the baby on her back and moved toward the door. "You are brave, helping him. The men in town, they talk, say bad things." "Let them talk," Nell said, though the words stung. Toppy smiled, a rare expression. "Yes, let them talk. Words are just wind." She paused at the door. "You need help. You make smoke. 3 puffs. We will see." After she left, Nell prepared the medicine as shown. The smell was pungent, earthy. When she spooned it between Cole's lips, he swallowed reflexively. Within hours, his skin felt cooler, his sleep more peaceful. She began keeping detailed notes in her mother's journal, tracking everything with scientific precision. Asterisk day 14, fever reduced, wound closing well, applied Toppy's poultice. Patient showed eye movement when I spoke. Pulse steady at 72. Asterisk. Asterisk day 15, definite improvement, less delirium. Managed to get full cup of broth down him. wound pink and healthy-looking. The routine gave her purpose, kept her grounded when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm. She found herself looking forward to these quiet moments of documentation, when she could process the strange intimacy of caring for a stranger. On the 16th day, she was changing his bandages when his hand suddenly gripped her wrist. Not hard, but firm. His eyes were open, gray and confused, but definitely aware. "Where?" The word came out as a croak. "You're safe," Nell said quickly, her heart pounding. "You were shot. Your men brought you here. That was over 2 weeks ago." His gaze focused on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "You saved me. I cleaned your wounds and kept your fever down. You saved yourself by being too stubborn to die." The ghost of a smile touched his lips before his eyes closed again, but his breathing remained steady, and she knew he was sleeping now, not unconscious. It was a crucial difference. That night, she allowed herself to really look at him as a man, not just a patient. His face had lost the gaunt look of fever, revealing strong bones and weather-worn character. His hands, resting on the blanket, were scarred but graceful, the hands of someone who worked with both rope and gun. She found herself wondering what those hands had done, what stories they could tell. Day 17 brought rain, a steady, soaking rain that drummed on the roof and turned the yard to mud. She hung blankets over the windows to keep out the drafts and built up the fire until the cabin was almost cozy. Cole woke several times, each period of consciousness lasting longer. He managed to drink water on his own, though his hands shook with the effort. "How long?" he asked during one lucid moment. 17 days, she replied, showing him the marks on the window frame. "I promised myself I'd give you 30 days to heal. You're ahead of schedule." He studied the notches. Then her face. "Why?" It was such a simple question, but she found it hard to answer. "Because everyone deserves a chance to live," she finally said. "Because I could help, so I did." He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm in your debt." "There's no debt between neighbors," she said firmly. "Rest now. Growing new blood is tiring work." By day 18, she knew they'd turned a corner. Cole was able to sit up briefly, though it left him shaking and sweating. She supported him with pillows, noting how natural it felt to have her arm around his shoulders, steadying him. "I need to know," he said, his voice stronger now. "My men, did they say what happened?" "Just that you were ambushed. Buck left money for your care and said the herd had to move on." Cole's jaw tightened. "Pike's doing. He wanted me to look the other way while his men changed the brands on stolen cattle. When I refused," he gestured weakly at his chest. "Will he come after you again?" "Likely." Cole met her eyes steadily. "I'm sorry. I've brought trouble to your door." "Trouble was already scratching at my door," Nell replied. "At least now I know what face it wears." That evening, as she helped him take a few spoonfuls of soup, his first solid food, she felt the weight of what was building between them. Not just the intimacy of caregiver and patient, but something deeper, in saving his life. She'd somehow bound their fates together. Outside, the rain continued, washing the dust from the air and filling the depleted water barrels. Inside, two people sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rhythm of the weather and finding peace in each other's presence. As she marked the 18th notch on the window frame, Nell realized she no longer counted the days until he would leave. Instead, she found herself hoping the remaining 12 days would pass slowly, giving them time to discover what this unexpected connection might become. "Thank you," Cole said softly as she helped him lie back down. "Not just for saving my life. For talking to me when I couldn't answer. For treating me like a man worth saving." Nell's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "Rest now," she said gently. "Tomorrow will get you standing. Can't have you getting soft on my watch." As she settled into her chair for another night of vigilance, she thought about Toppy's words. Yes, she was brave, But it was a different kind of bravery than she'd expected, the courage to open her heart when it would have been safer to keep it closed. The morning of day 19 dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the cabin windows like a benediction. Cole's fever had broken completely, leaving him weak but lucid. When Nell brought him water, he managed to hold the cup himself, though his hands trembled with the effort. "Water," he whispered after draining the cup. The word carried weight beyond its simple meaning. It was acknowledgement, gratitude, a small victory over death. Nell refilled the cup, watching as he drank more slowly this time, savoring each swallow. His throat worked painfully. 17 days of fever had left it raw. She'd been spooning liquids into him for so long that seeing him drink independently felt like witnessing a miracle. "The herd," he said after a moment, his voice still hoarse. "Buck would have taken them to Fort Benton by now. Good man, Buck. Knew I could trust him to see it through." "He seemed worried about you," Nell offered, settling into her chair. "Said you were the best trail boss in the territory." A bitter smile crossed Cole's face. Not good enough to avoid an ambush, apparently. He shifted, wincing at the movement. "How bad is it, the wound?" "Healing clean now. You'll have a scar, but the fever's gone and there's no more infection. You're lucky another day without treatment and—" She didn't finish the sentence. "And I'd be feeding the coyotes." Cole's gray eyes found hers. "Instead, I'm here, being tended by—" He paused, seeming to truly see her for the first time. "I don't even know your name. All these days, and I don't know the name of the woman who saved my life." "Nell Hart." "Nell." He tested the name carefully. "Short for Eleanor." "Just Nell. My mother said it was enough name for anyone." Outside, a herd of pronghorn antelope bounded across the grassland, their white rumps flashing in the sun. In the distance, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising another storm. The territory was like that beauty and danger dancing together, never quite separate. On day 20, Pike's men returned. This time there were 5 of them, and they meant business. Nell saw them coming from the window, their rifles already drawn. "Get down," she hissed to Cole, who had managed to sit up in bed. "They're back." Despite his weakness, Cole's instincts kicked in. "My gun!" "You can barely hold a cup, let alone a Colt," Nell said firmly. "Stay down and let me handle this." She grabbed her father's rifle and stepped onto the porch, using the doorframe as cover. The riders had spread out in a semicircle, cutting off escape routes. "Last chance, woman," the thin man called. "Hand over Archer and we'll be on our way." "And I told you, there's no one here by that name. Just a sick man recovering from wounds that might have been put there by bushwhackers and claim jumpers." "Don't play games. We know—" His words were cut off by an arrow that thudded into the fence post inches from his horse's head. The animal reared, nearly unseating him. From the brush line, Toppy emerged, another arrow already knocked. Behind her, 2 Crow warriors materialized like smoke, their faces painted for war. "The woman speaks truth," Toppy called out. "This is a place of healing. You bring guns to a medicine lodge. Very bad, very unlucky." The pikemen looked nervous now. Fighting one woman was one thing. Taking on Crow warriors was another matter entirely. Everyone knew the Crow had no love for Pike, who'd been grazing his cattle on their traditional hunting grounds. "This ain't your business, Indian," the thin man snarled, but his bravado was cracking. "Everything on this land is our business," one of the warriors said in accented English. "You go now, not come back." Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Pike's men had no choice. They wheeled their horses around, but the thin man couldn't resist a parting shot. "When the law comes calling, you remember you chose the wrong side." After they'd gone, Toppy approached the cabin. "They will return," she said simply. "With more men, maybe with the white man's law." "I know," Nell replied. Thank you for... Toppy waved off the thanks. You help one who respects the people. We remember our friends. She glanced through the doorway to where Cole was struggling to stand. He grows stronger. This is good. He will need strength for what comes. That night, Cole insisted on teaching Nell how to better defend the cabin. Still weak, he directed from his bed while she moved furniture to create better cover, positioned water buckets in case of fire, and learned the best angles for covering the approaches. You've done this before, she observed, watching him calculate sight lines like a general planning a battle. Too many times. His voice carried old pain. Lost my brother Ethan in a fight like this. Ranch war down in Texas. He was 18. Thought it was all a grand adventure until a bullet found him. Cole's hands clenched the blanket. I swore I'd never fight another man's war for pay. Swore I'd make my living honest, driving cattle, not stealing them or killing for them. Nell sat on the edge of the bed, moved by the raw emotion in his voice. Is that why you refused Pike, even knowing what it might cost? A man's got to be able to look at himself in the mirror, Cole said quietly. What good is living if you can't live with yourself? Day 21 brought an unexpected respite. Cole managed to stand for the first time, leaning heavily on Nell but upright. The triumph of it lit his face, making him look younger despite the ordeal he'd endured. Easy, Nell cautioned as he swayed. Your body's been fighting a war. It needs time to remember how to do simple things. I need to be stronger, he said through gritted teeth. I won't let you face Pike's men alone again. You won't let me. Despite the situation, Nell felt a spark of her old fire. Last I checked, this was my home and my fight. Cole's eyes softened. You're right. I'm sorry. It's just the thought of you in danger because of me. They stood there, her arms supporting him, his weight warm against her side. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Days 22 through 25 passed in a blur of small victories. Cole took his first steps alone, ate solid food, even managed to shave with Nell's help. The intimacy of it, her hand steadying his, the careful scrape of the razor, the concentration on his face created a different kind of tension between them. He told her more about his life during those long afternoons, how he'd learned to work cattle as a boy in Texas, his father a harsh man who believed in the strap more than the scripture, how he'd run away at 15, worked his way north, learned to read the land and the weather and the hearts of men. Never had much schooling, he admitted. But I can track a steer through a thunderstorm and bring a herd through drought country without losing more than a few head. My mother was a teacher before she married, Nell said. She made sure I could read and cipher, said a woman needed education even more than a man, since the world was less inclined to give her opportunities. Smart woman. Cole studied her with those storm-gray eyes. Raised a smart daughter, too. Brave and kind and too stubborn to let a dying man die. On day 26, everything changed. A rider approached at sunset, not one of Pike's men, but Buck Morrison, looking trail-worn and worried. Cole! The old cowboy's face split into a grin when he saw his boss standing in the doorway. By God, I didn't think... When we left you here, I thought I'd be coming back for your body. Takes more than a bushwhacker's bullet to put me down, Cole said, clasping Buck's hand warmly. The herd. Delivered safe to Fort Benton. Got top dollar, too. The boys wanted me to check on you before we signed on with another outfit. Buck's expression darkened. There's news you need to hear. Pike's been spreading poison about you in town. Says you were stealing his cattle. That the ambush was self-defense. He's got the sheriff in his pocket. Cole... There's talk of a warrant. Nell felt Cole tense beside her. Let them come, he said quietly. I've got nothing to hide. It ain't about what's true, Buck warned. It's about who's got the gold to buy the verdict they want. Pike's been planning this. The ambush was just the start. They talked late into the night, planning strategy. Buck had brought Cole's possessions from the trail. His guns, some clothes, and a small leather wallet containing a few precious items. Nell saw Cole handle an old photograph with careful reverence before tucking it away. Day 27 dawned with frost on the grass. Winter's first warning. Cole was strong enough now to help with chores, though Nell fussed at him not to overexert. Watching him split kindling with careful precision, she realized how natural his presence had become. The cabin no longer felt empty with him there. That afternoon, while checking snares she'd set for rabbits, Nell found evidence that someone had been watching the cabin. Boot prints, the stub of a cigarette, marks where a horse had been tethered. The surveillance had begun. "We need to be ready," Cole said when she told him. "Pike won't wait much longer. He needs me gone before anyone starts asking real questions about that ambush." That night, as Nell banked the fire, Cole caught her hand. "These past days," he began, then stopped, struggling for words. "I was ready to die in that ambush, had made my peace with it. But you gave me a reason to fight, not just to survive, but to live, really live." Nell's heart raced at his touch, at the intensity in his voice. "You'd have done the same for anyone," she said, though she knew it wasn't true. What had grown between them was far beyond simple charity. "No," Cole said firmly. "What you did, it was sacred. That's the only word for it. You poured your strength into keeping me alive, and I swear to you, Nell Hart, I won't waste that gift." On day 28, the frost was heavier, and the wind carried the scent of snow. They worked together to prepare the cabin for siege, filling every container with water, checking ammunition, reinforcing the shutters. Their movements were coordinated now, anticipating each other's needs without words, as the sun set on day 29, painting the sky in the shades of blood and gold. They stood together on the porch, watching the horizon. "Tomorrow's the last day," Nell said quietly. 30 days, like I promised myself." Cole turned to her, his face serious. "And then you're a free man, healed enough to ride away if you choose." The words cost her more than she'd expected. "What if I don't want to ride away?" His voice was low, intense. "What if I want to stay and fight not just Pike, but for something worth fighting for?" Before she could answer, he kissed her. It wasn't passionate or desperate, but gentle and sure, like a promise made without words. When they parted, Nell saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. 30 days, she whispered. "You've kept your part of the bargain by surviving. Tomorrow, we'll see what comes next." As they went inside, the first snowflakes began to fall, dancing in the lamplight like tiny blessings. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The healing time was ending, but something new was just beginning. Day 30 arrived with a cold dawn, ice crystals forming on the cabin windows like nature's lace. Cole was already awake when Nell stirred, standing by the window and watching the sun paint the frozen grassland gold. His recovery had been remarkable, from death's door to standing strong in just 30 days. "You're up early," she said, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. "Couldn't sleep." He turned to face her, and she saw determination etched in every line of his face. "Been thinking about what needs doing. Pike won't let this rest, and I won't have you caught in the crossfire any longer than necessary." Nell moved to the stove, starting the morning ritual of coffee and breakfast. "I told you before, this is my fight too now. You didn't bring trouble to my door, Pike did, when he decided the law was whatever he said it was." As she worked, Cole told her his plan. He would ride to town, turn himself in to Sheriff Bradley, and demand a proper hearing. Buck had agreed to gather witnesses, cowboys who'd seen Pike's men changing brands, merchants who'd been threatened for not playing along. "It's risky," Nell said, setting a plate before him. "Bradley's in Pike's pocket." "Maybe, but there are still good people in town. Judge Harrison rides circuit next week. He's straight as they come. If we can just hold out until then." And the morning passed too quickly. Cole cleaned and checked his guns with methodical precision. Movements, sure, despite his recent ordeal. Nell found herself memorizing small details, the way he squinted slightly when concentrating, the careful way he handled his weapons, the unconscious grace of a man comfortable with danger. "I need you to promise me something," he said as he buckled on his gun belt. "If this goes bad, if Pike's men come here—" "I won't run," Nell interrupted. "This is my home. My parents are buried on this land. I won't abandon it." Cole caught her shoulders gently. "I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to survive. There's a difference." His thumb traced her cheekbone with surprising tenderness. "You saved my life, Nell Hart. The thought of losing you now." She covered his hand with hers. "Then we'd better make sure it doesn't come to that." They stood frozen for a moment, the weight of unspoken words heavy between them. Then Cole pulled her close, holding her as if trying to memorize the feeling. "That first morning, when I woke and saw you, clearly really saw you, I thought I'd died and you were some kind of angel. Took me days to realize you were real, and even more miraculous for it." "Cole," she began, but he pressed on. "Let me say this while I can. These 30 days, you didn't just heal my body. You reminded me why life is worth fighting for. When Pike's bullet hit me, I was tired. Nell, tired of the trail. Tired of the fight, tired of being alone, ready to let go." He pulled back to look at her. "But you wouldn't let me. Every day, your voice called me back. Your hands." He caught one of her hands, pressing it to his chest where the scar was forming. "They brought me back to life." Nell felt tears prick her eyes. "You fought your own way back. I just kept the fire burning." "No." His voice was fierce with conviction. "What you did was sacred. The whole territory's talking about it, the woman with healing hands who brought a dying man back from the edge. They don't understand it was more than medicine. It was faith, faith in life, in the possibility of tomorrow. You gave me that." She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and hope into the contact. When they parted, both were breathless. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Whatever happens in town, come back." "I will." He strapped on his coat, settled his hat. "Keep the rifle handy. And Nell, thank you for everything." She watched him ride away on Buck's spare horse, his back straight despite everything he'd endured. Only when he disappeared over the rise did she allow herself to cry brief, hot tears of worry and longing. The day stretched endlessly. Nell tried to keep busy mending, cleaning, preparing medicines, but her ears strained for the sound of hoofbeats. Every bird call made her jump. Every wind gust sounded like riders approaching. Late afternoon brought what she'd been dreading. Dust clouds on the horizon. Too many riders for comfort. She loaded the rifle, checked the revolver Cole had left her, and took position by the window. But as the riders drew closer, she recognized Buck's grizzled beard and Cole's straight-backed posture. Relief flooded through her until she noticed Cole's hands were tied, his horse being led by Sheriff Bradley himself. She met them in the yard, rifle visible but not raised. "Sheriff." Bradley, a thin man with the demeanor of someone perpetually apologetic for existing, couldn't meet her eyes. "Miss Hart, I'm sorry about this, but Mr. Archer's been charged with cattle theft. He'll get a fair hearing when the judge comes through." "Fair." Buck spat tobacco juice dangerously close to the sheriff's boots. "Like the fair ambush that nearly killed him." "That's enough, Morrison," Bradley warned. "I'm doing this legal-like. Archer came willing, and he'll be treated decent until trial." Cole's eyes found Nell's. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Truth will out, one way or another." "I'm coming to town," Nell announced. "Someone needs to make sure he's cared for properly. That wound's still healing." Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "Now, Miss Hart, that wouldn't be proper." "Neither is letting a man die of neglect in your jail," she shot back. "I'll be there first thing tomorrow with medical supplies and food. Unless you plan to stop me." The sheriff wilted under her glare. "No, ma'am. I suppose that would be acceptable." As they prepared to leave, Cole managed to lean toward her despite his bonds. "The photograph in my wallet," he said quietly. "Keep it safe for me." She nodded, understanding this was important, though not knowing why. The riders departed, leaving her alone with the echo of hoofbeats and a heart heavy with dread. That night, she found the wallet among Cole's few possessions. Inside was a small tintype, a young woman with kind eyes and a child on her lap. Cole's wife, the child he'd never mentioned. The photograph was worn from handling, cherished. On the back, in faded ink, Sarah and Emma, 1871. Nell studied the faces, seeing pain in Cole's past she hadn't guessed at. Whatever had happened to them, their loss had shaped him into the man who'd refused to look away from injustice, even at the cost of his own safety. She spent the evening preparing for battle of a different kind. She packed medical supplies, baked bread, prepared soup that would keep if they wanted to paint her as a shameless woman for helping Cole. So be it. She'd wear their scorn like armor. Buck arrived near midnight, slipping in quiet as a shadow. "Thought you should know," he said without preamble. "Pike's bringing in a lawyer from Helena. Slick fellow who'd argue black was white if the price was right. Cole needs help. Miss Nell, the kind money can't buy." "He'll have it," she promised. "What about witnesses?" "Working on it. But folks are scared. Pike's got long arms and a longer memory." Buck hesitated. "There's something else. That photograph Cole asked you to keep his wife and daughter, killed by Comancheros 8 years back. He was off on a drive, came home to ashes. Nearly destroyed him. Only thing that kept him going was work, honest work. He always insisted. Said it was the only way to honor their memory." Nell's throat tightened. Now she understood the depth of Cole's integrity. Why he'd rather face death than compromise his principles. He was trying to be the man his family would have been proud of. "We won't let Pike win," she said firmly. "Too much depends on it." Buck nodded, touched his hat, and vanished back into the night. Nell sat by the dying fire, planning her campaign. Pike might have money and influence, but she had something more powerful, the truth, and the determination to see it heard. Day 31 dawned clear and cold. Nell dressed carefully, choosing her mother's best dress, respectable but not ostentatious. She loaded the wagon with supplies and drove to town, her head high despite the stares and whispers that followed her progress. The jail was a small stone building that smelled of mold and despair. Bradley let her in reluctantly, hovering as she examined Cole's cell. It was damp and cold, with only a thin blanket on the narrow cot. "This won't do," she announced. "He's still recovering from a near-fatal wound. This cold could bring back the fever." "Now, Miss Hart," Bradley began, but she cut him off. "I'll be bringing proper blankets and a small brazier for warmth. Unless you want to explain to Judge Harrison how a man in your custody died before trial." Cole watched her with a mixture of admiration and amusement as she bullied the sheriff into allowing her improvements. When Bradley finally retreated, Cole reached through the bars to catch her hand. "You're magnificent when you're angry," he said softly. "Have I mentioned that?" "Save your flattery," she replied, but squeezed his hand. "How are you really?" "Better now." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Just seeing you makes everything bearable. But Nell, you shouldn't—" "Don't!" She pressed her free hand to his lips. "Don't tell me what I shouldn't do. Not after 30 days of shouldn't. We're past that now." He kissed her fingers. "Yes," he agreed. "We are." As she unwrapped the food she'd brought, Nell made her decision. She would not let this man, this good, honorable man who'd suffered so much, face injustice alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "I'll be here every day," she promised. "Pike thinks he can break you with cold and isolation, but he doesn't know what we've already survived. 30 days brought you back from death. We can handle whatever comes next." Cole's smile was like sunrise after a long, dark night. "With you beside me, I believe we can." As she left the jail, Nell noticed more people watching her, not all with condemnation. Mrs. Chen from the general store nodded respectfully. The blacksmith's wife offered a small smile. Perhaps Buck was right. Perhaps there were still good people willing to stand up, if someone showed them the way. The battle for justice was just beginning. But Nell Hart had learned something in those 30 days of healing. Sometimes the most powerful force in the world was simply refusing to give up on someone worth saving. The week that followed tested everyone's resolve. Cole remained in jail while Pike's lawyer, a serpent named Josiah Whitman, arrived from Helena with leather cases full of papers and a smile that never reached his eyes. He set up court in the hotel, interviewing Pike's men and crafting a narrative that painted Cole as a dangerous rustler who terrorized honest ranchers. Nell maintained her daily visits, bringing food and medicine despite increasing hostility. Someone painted "whore" on the side of her wagon one night. She scrubbed it off and drove to town the next morning with her chin high. When Mrs. Henley made a cutting remark at the general store, other women wives of small ranchers and shopkeepers suddenly stepped forward. "Leave her be, Martha," said Emma Rodriguez, the baker's wife. "Takes courage to do what's right when everyone's watching." The tide was turning. Slowly, Buck worked tirelessly, convincing cowboys to speak up. The breakthrough came when young Tommy Morrison, no relation to Buck, despite the name, limped into town. He'd been one of Pike's hands until a week ago. "Can't stay quiet no more," he told Nell outside the jail. "What they done to Mr. Archer ain't right. I seen them change the brands. Pike said it was legal-like, but I knew better." "Will you testify?" she asked urgently. Tommy was barely 18, his face still soft with youth. "Pike's men near broke my leg when I said I was leaving. But yeah, I'll speak up. My ma didn't raise no coward." That evening, as Nell tended Cole's wound, it was healing well, but still tender, she shared the news. Hope flickered in his eyes for the first time since his arrest. "Brave kid," he murmured. "Pike will come after him hard. Buck's hiding him at the widow Patterson's boarding house. She's got a shotgun and opinions about Pike that would blister paint." Nell rebandaged his chest with practiced efficiency. "More people are finding their courage. You were right, truth wants to come out." Cole caught her hand. "How are you holding up? This can't be easy, facing down the whole town." "Not the whole town," she corrected. "Just the loudest parts. And I've faced worse. Remember that rattlesnake on day 4? He chuckled, then sobered. "I remember everything, every day, every word you spoke when I was fevered. You talked about your parents, about learning to ride, about the time you got lost in a blizzard and survived by burrowing into a snowbank. You heard all that. Your voice was my anchor. When the fever tried to drag me under, you kept pulling me back." He brought her hand to his lips. "I meant what I said. Sacred. That's what you are to me." 3 days before Judge Harrison was due to arrive, violence erupted. Pike's men jumped Tommy Morrison as he left the boarding house. Buck and 2 other cowboys intervened, and the street exploded into a brawl. By the time Sheriff Bradley restored order, Buck had a bullet graze on his arm, and one of Pike's men had a broken jaw. Nell was bandaging Buck's arm when unexpected help arrived. Toppy appeared with 5 Crow warriors, their faces painted for ceremony rather than war. They rode slowly down Main Street, stopping in front of the jail. "We come to speak for the one who respects the people," Toppy announced loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "Cole Archer lived among us one winter when his horse broke its leg. He learned our ways, hunted with our men, protected our women and children when soldiers came. He is not a thief. He has honor." The crowd murmured. Having the Crow speak for a white man was almost unheard of. Pike himself emerged from the hotel, his face flushed with anger. "This is a matter for white man's law," he blustered. "Indians got no say in it." One of the warriors, An older man with silver threading his braids spoke in clear English. "We have traded at this town for 20 winters. We know who speaks truth and who speaks lies. Cole Archer speaks truth. You," he spat deliberately, "you steal grass from our hunting grounds. You poison water with your cattle. You are the thief." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Pike's hand twitched toward his gun, but the presence of armed warriors and the watching crowd stayed him. "Get out of my town," he snarled. "Not your town," Toppy said calmly. "Belongs to all who live honest. We camp outside until Judge comes. We watch. We remember." That night, Nell found herself hosting an unexpected gathering. Buck, Tommy, the Rodriguez family, and several other townspeople crowded into the jail's small visiting area. Even Sheriff Bradley lingered, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Thing is," old Sam the barber was saying, "we all knew Pike was crooked. Just seemed easier to look away than fight." "Easier ain't always right," Buck growled. "Cole knew that. Why, he's in this cell while Pike walks free." "What exactly did happen that day?" Emma Rodriguez asked. "The ambush?" Buck's face darkened. "Pike wanted Cole to look other way while his boys changed brands on stolen cattle. Offered him good money, too. Cole refused. Said he'd report it to the federal marshal next time one came through. Week later. Ambush. 5 men with rifles, waiting in Devil's Canyon. Only reason Cole survived is he was riding drag that day. Checking a lame steer. Heard the shots. Came up careful like. Still took 2 bullets before he could get to cover." "And you just left him?" This from Bradley, surprising everyone. "Had no choice. Herd was stampeding, men scattered. Cole ordered us to get the cattle through. Said he'd catch up. When he didn't, I rode back. Found him half dead. Brought him to Miss Nell because..." Buck glanced at her. "Because I'd heard her mother was a healer. Figured if anyone could save him, it'd be Hart women." The measles outbreak started 2 days before the judge arrived. 3 children in the mining camp fell ill first. Then it spread like wildfire. Nell found herself torn between tending Cole and helping the sick children. In the end, she did both, working herself to exhaustion. It was Toppy who brought the solution, arriving at the jail with bundles of herbs. "For the spotted sickness," she said. "My people know this illness. These help." Together, they set up a makeshift clinic in the church. Reverend Crane protested at first about heathen medicine in his sanctuary. But when his own grandson fell ill, he quickly changed his tune. Nell and Toppy worked side by side, teaching mothers how to prepare the herbal steam treatments, how to cool fevers without causing chills. "You good healer," Toppy said one evening as they prepared more medicine. "Not just body, spirit too. This why you saved Cole Archer. His spirit was broken from old pain. You fix that too." Nell thought of the photograph, of Sarah and Emma. "He lost his family." "Yes, but now he finds new purpose, new reason to fight." Toppy smiled slightly. "Maybe new family too, if he not too stubborn to see." The night before Judge Harrison arrived, Pike made his move. Nell was returning from the church when 3 riders surrounded her wagon. Not Pike's usual thugs, these were strangers, hired guns with dead eyes. "Miss Hart," the leaders said with mock courtesy. "Mister, Pike wants to offer you a deal. Leave town tonight, stop your meddling, and he'll see you compensated for your trouble. $500 in safe passage anywhere you want to go." "And if I refuse?" The man's smile was cold. "Accidents happen. Cabins burn. Women traveling alone meet unfortunate ends. Would be a shame. After all your charitable work." Fear crawled up her spine, but anger burned hotter. "Tell Pike he can take his offer and..." A rifle shot cracked through the night. Buck emerged from the shadows, accompanied by Tommy and 4 other cowboys. More guns appeared in windows along the street. "You boys lost?" Buck asked conversationally. His rifle trained steady. "Because you're about to be permanent-like." The hired guns calculated odds. found them wanting and wheeled their horses around. As they galloped off, Buck spat, words out about them threatening you. Miss Nell, folks are getting mighty tired of Pike's ways. Judge Harrison arrived on the morning stage, a small man with sharp eyes and a reputation for strict fairness. By noon, the courthouse was packed. Pike sat with his lawyer, confident. Cole stood straight despite his ordeal, Nell beside him as a medical advisor to the court. The trial began with Whitman painting a damning picture. According to him, Cole had systematically stolen cattle, threatened honest ranchers, and turned to violence when confronted. The ambush was self-defense by terrified property owners. Then it was Cole's turn. Speaking clearly, he laid out the truth. Buck corroborated, as did Tommy. When Tommy described being beaten for refusing to change brands, several people in the gallery gasped. But the turning point came when Toppy was called. Whitman objected, saying Indians couldn't testify, but Judge Harrison overruled him. This court recognizes all honest testimony, he said sternly. Proceed. Toppy not only vouched for Cole's character, but produced something unexpected, a leather pouch containing spent bullets. These we find at ambush site, cavalry bullets, not from Cowboy's guns, from soldier rifles Pike buys from corrupt sergeant at fort. The courtroom erupted. Selling military weapons was a federal crime. Pike's face went white as Toppy continued, explaining how her warriors had tracked the ambushers, found where they'd waited, collected evidence. By the time Nell testified about Cole's condition when brought to her describing his wounds in clinical detail that made it clear he had been shot from ambush. Not in a fair fight, the case was crumbling. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Sheriff Bradley stood up. I got something to say, he announced, voice shaking. Pike's been paying me to look the other way. I ain't proud of it, but I can't stand by and watch an innocent man hang. He produced a ledger, kept records, every bribe, every threat. It's all here. Judge Harrison's verdict was swift. Cole was cleared of all charges. Pike was arrested for attempted murder, cattle theft, and trafficking in military weapons. His empire, built on intimidation and corruption, collapsed in a single morning. As they left the courthouse, Cole walking free into the sunshine, the town seemed different. People nodded respectfully. Some even applauded. Mrs. Chen pressed a small packet of tea into Nell's hands. For healing, she said simply. But what moved Nell most was the group of children, recovered from measles, who ran up with flowers picked from the prairie. For the angel lady, one said shyly. Not an angel, Nell protested, kneeling to accept the bouquet. Just someone who believes in doing what's right. That evening, at a celebration in the church hall, Reverend Crane had undergone quite a conversion regarding charity. Cole pulled Nell aside. I've been thinking, he said, about what comes next. The territory needs healing, not just from sickness, but from the kind of poison Pike spread. Fear, division, looking away from suffering. What are you proposing? Stay. Help me build something better. A place where justice means something, where people take care of each other. He took her hands. I'm not good with pretty words. Nell, but I know I want to spend my life with someone who sees the sacred in ordinary kindness, who fights for what's right even when it costs everything. Will you marry me? Around them, the celebration continued. Cowboys and shopkeepers, ranchers and miners, even Toppy's people who'd been invited in, all sharing food and hope. It was what community could be when fear lost its hold. Yes, Nell said simply. But I have conditions. We expand the clinic. We make sure no one suffers alone. We teach others what Toppy taught me about healing. We build something that lasts. Cole's smile was radiant. Partners in all things. Partners in all things. As they sealed the promise with a kiss, the future stretched before them, not easy, but bright with possibility. The 30 days of healing had ended, but the real work of building a life together was just beginning. The journey to the county seat took 2 days through rough country that tested both horses and passengers. The road, if it could be called that, was little more than wagon ruts carved into the prairie, winding through coulees and over ridges where the wind cut like a skinning knife. Cole rode alongside Nell's wagon, still favoring his left side but sitting straighter each day. Sheriff Bradley accompanied them, a changed man since his courthouse confession. He'd resigned his position, planning to testify fully about Pike's corruption network. Behind them came Buck and Tommy Morrison, rifles ready. Pike's money could still buy vengeance, even from a jail cell. "Storm coming," Buck observed, studying the northern horizon where clouds stacked like black anvils. "Might want to push harder for Millerville." They almost made it. The first fat raindrops spattered down as they reached Widow Johansson's way station, 10 miles short of town. Within minutes, the sky opened. Rain fell in sheets, turning the road to soup, making travel impossible. "This'll do," Cole decided, helping Nell from the wagon. Better to arrive late than not at all. The way station was crowded with other travelers fleeing the storm. They found space in the common room, spreading bedrolls near the fireplace. The widow, a stout German woman with kind eyes, recognized Nell. "You're the one with the healing hands," she said in accented English. "My cousin in town. She wrote about you. Said you and the Indian woman saved the children." As the storm raged outside, talk turned inevitably to recent events. A freight hauler mentioned Pike's remaining men causing trouble, trying to intimidate witnesses. "Won't work," another traveler said. "Federal marshals are coming. Weapons trafficking brings serious law." Cole listened quietly, but Nell saw his jaw tighten. He still carried guilt about bringing danger to her door, no matter how often she told him otherwise. Late that night, as rain hammered the roof, Nell woke to find Cole's bedroll empty. She found him on the covered porch, watching lightning illuminate the prairie in stark flashes. "Couldn't sleep," he said as she joined him. "Keep thinking about what's ahead. Pike had judges in his pocket before. What if—" "Stop," she took his hand. "We've come this far with truth on our side. Have faith." He pulled her close, and they stood watching the storm. "When I was fevered," he said quietly, "I dreamed of my daughter, Emma. She'd be 12 now. If—" His voice broke slightly. "In the dream, she told me it was time to stop just surviving, time to live again." Nell thought of the photograph she still carried. "She'd be proud of the man you are, fighting for justice, protecting others." "I hope so." He pressed his lips to her hair. "I want to build something good, Nell, something that honors their memory and makes your sacrifice worthwhile." "We will," she promised, together. Morning brought clear skies and treacherous roads. It took most of the day to navigate the final miles. Wheels sliding, horses straining. They reached Millerville mud-splattered and exhausted as shadows lengthened. The county courthouse was impressive, 2 stories of limestone with columns flanking the entrance. But Nell noticed armed men lounging nearby, watching their arrival with unfriendly eyes. "Pike's money reaches far," Bradley muttered. "Best watch ourselves." They took rooms at the National Hotel, Cole insisting on paying despite Nell's protests. "You've spent enough on my account," he said firmly. "Let me do this much." That evening brought an unexpected visitor. Josiah Whitman appeared at Nell's door, his oily smile intact despite his client's imprisonment. "Miss Hart, might we speak privately?" "Say your piece here," Cole said, appearing from his adjacent room. Buck and Tommy flanked him immediately. Whitman's smile never wavered. "Very well, Mr. Pike wishes to make a generous offer. He'll plead guilty to lesser charges, serve minimal time, and in exchange, drop all civil claims against Mr. Archer. Additionally, Miss Hart receives $1,000 for her inconvenience." No deal, Cole said flatly. Consider carefully. Trials can go many ways. Witnesses recant, evidence disappears, jurors have families to think of. The threat was silk-wrapped but clear. Nell stepped forward. Mr. Whitman, I've kept detailed medical records of Cole's wounds. Every measurement, every observation. Those wounds tell a story of ambush and attempted murder that no amount of money can rewrite. Please inform Mr. Pike that truth isn't for sale. Whitman's smile finally slipped. You're making a dangerous choice. We've made our choice. Cole said, Now get out. After he left, they reinforced their precautions. Buck organized shifts to stand watch. Tommy volunteered to sleep across Nell's doorway. My ma would skin me if I let anything happen to you, Miss Nell. The trial began 2 days later in a packed courtroom. Judge Elias Morton presiding, older than Harrison, with a reputation for thorough deliberation. Prosecutor James Donnelly was young but earnest, determined to make his mark with this case. Whitman had assembled an impressive defense team. They attacked every witness's credibility, painted Cole as a violent drifter, suggested Nell's testimony was compromised by romantic involvement. Isn't it true, Whitman pressed during cross-examination, that you developed feelings for the defendant during his convalescence? Nell met his gaze steadily. I developed respect for a man who chose integrity over easy money. If that compromises my testimony about the medical facts of his wounds, perhaps you could explain how... The gallery chuckled. Whitman retreated. But the damage was done. He'd planted seeds of doubt about her objectivity. Tommy's testimony proved crucial. Despite Whitman's attempts to paint him as a disgruntled employee, the boy's earnest manner won over the jury. When he described work ordering brand changes, showing the jury exactly how it was done. Several ranchers in the gallery nodded knowingly. But the prosecution's star witness was unexpected Sergeant Michael O'Brien from Fort Keogh. Granted immunity for his testimony, he detailed how Pike purchased surplus rifles, how payments were made, where the weapons went. His evidence was damning. Pike himself took the stand on day 3, projecting wounded dignity. He spoke of building his ranch from nothing, of Cole's jealousy and threats, of defending himself against rustlers. He was convincing Pike hadn't survived this long without learning to lie well. The defense rested, confident. During recess, Nell overheard jurors muttering about reasonable doubt. That evening, their group gathered in Cole's room, mood somber. He might walk, Buck said bluntly. Jury's full of men who owe money to Pike's bank. We've done what we can, Cole said, but Nell heard the frustration in his voice. A knock interrupted them. Sheriff Bradley entered with a travel-worn man, lean, sharp-eyed, wearing a federal marshal's badge. Marshal John Taggart. He introduced himself. Been investigating weapons trafficking in the territory. Heard I might find interesting folks here. They shared what they knew. Taggart listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions. When they finished, he smiled grimly. Been tracking those rifles for months, thanks to Sergeant O'Brien's testimony and your evidence. We've got enough for federal charges. But first, let's see what tomorrow brings in this trial. The final day dawned cold and clear. Closing arguments were passionate Whitman painting Pike as a persecuted success story. Donnelly methodically laying out evidence of conspiracy and attempted murder. Judge Morton's instructions to the jury were careful, emphasizing the burden of proof. The jury retired. Hours crawled by. Nell paced the courthouse halls, Cole's hand in hers. Whatever happens, he said, I need you to know these weeks with you have been worth everything, if I had to do it all again. Hush, she said. No looking back, only forward. The jury returned as sunset painted the courthouse windows gold. The foreman, a weathered rancher named Josiah Brandt, stood. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Pike shot to his feet, face purple with rage. You can't do this. I own this county. I made you all. "Sit down, Mr. Pike." Judge Morton commanded, "Continue, Mr. Foreman. On the charge of cattle theft, guilty. On conspiracy to commit murder, guilty." Each verdict fell like a hammer blow. Pike's empire, built on fear and greed, crumbled in moments. As guards led Pike away, Marshal Taggart stepped forward. "Mr. Pike, I'm arresting you on federal charges of trafficking military weapons. You'll be transported to Fort Leavenworth for trial." Pike's curses echoed through the courthouse as they dragged him out. Whitman packed his cases without a word, his reputation in tatters. Outside, a crowd had gathered. As Nell and Cole emerged, applause broke out. Ranchers, farmers, townspeople who'd lived in fear, all celebrating justice finally served. "It's over," Nell breathed. "No," Cole corrected, pulling her close. "It's just beginning." That night, the National Hotel hosted an impromptu celebration. Stories flowed with the whiskey tales of Pike's tyranny, of small acts of resistance, of hope restored. Buck regaled listeners with the story of Nell's 30-day vigil, embellishing until she blushed. "She never gave up," he declared. "Fought death itself for this man. If that ain't love, I don't know what is." Later, Cole and Nell escaped to the hotel's small garden. Stars wheeled overhead, bright in the clear air. "Buck's right," Cole said softly. "What you did was love, even before either of us knew it." "Love and stubbornness," Nell corrected. "I wasn't about to let you win by dying." He laughed, the sound rich and free. "Marry me soon, Nell. I've wasted enough years grieving. I want to start really living with you." "Yes," she said simply, "as soon as we get home." They stood together in the starlight, planning a future that seemed impossibly bright. A proper clinic for the town. A small ranch where Cole could raise horses instead of chasing cattle. Children, perhaps, to fill the cabin with laughter. The road home would still be challenging. Pike's men remained at large. Building their dreams would take work and sacrifice. But they'd already survived the hardest test, choosing hope over fear, love over safety, justice over comfort. As they turned to go inside, Nell looked back at the courthouse where justice had finally prevailed. "My mother used to say that healing isn't just about mending bodies, it's about mending communities, restoring faith in each other." "Wise woman," Cole said. "She raised a wise daughter." "We've got work to do," Nell said, thinking of all the healing still needed not just in their town, but throughout the territory where men like Pike had held sway too long. "Together," Cole agreed, and the word held all their promises, all their hopes for the days ahead. The storm had passed. The road was clear, and two people who'd found each other in the darkest of circumstances walked forward into whatever future they could build, hand in hand, unafraid. The search of Pike's warehouses revealed more than anyone expected. Beyond the military rifles, Marshal Taggart's men found altered brand irons, forged land deeds, and ledgers detailing years of systematic theft. The web of corruption stretched from local officials to territorial legislators, all bought with stolen wealth. "This'll take months to sort out," Taggart told Cole and Nell over breakfast at the hotel. "But one thing's clear, a lot of stolen property is going back to rightful owners. Your testimony started an avalanche, Miss Hart." Pike himself broke during transport to Fort Leavenworth, facing federal charges that could mean life in prison. He desperately offered names, dates, and schemes in exchange for leniency. His former allies scrambled to distance themselves or flee the territory entirely. The journey home proved eventful. Word of Pike's conviction had spread, and at every stop, people emerged with stories. A homesteader whose cattle had vanished, a widow forced to sell her land cheap. Each tale reinforced how deep the poison had run. "Makes me ashamed," Sheriff Bradley confided as they camped by Willow Creek. "How many times I looked away. Told myself it wasn't my business." "You spoke up when it mattered," Nell said, That took courage. Too little, too late for some folks. Bradley stared into the fire. But maybe I can do better. Town needs a new sheriff. Thinking I might stand for election, do the job right this time. Cole nodded approval. Experience and hard-learned wisdom could do worse. They reached home to find changes already beginning. Several of Pike's hired guns had fled. Others, suddenly unemployed, were seeking honest work. The atmosphere in town felt lighter, like the morning after a fever breaks. But challenges remained. Pike's former segundo, Jake Hawkins, had claimed the ranch and remaining men. He sent word that anyone trying to reclaim allegedly stolen property would meet resistance. Let him bluster, Buck advised. Federal marshals will sort him out quick enough. More pressing was the measles aftermath. Several children remained weakened, and winter was approaching. Nell threw herself into establishing a proper clinic, using the main room of her cabin initially. "We need supplies," she told Cole one evening, reviewing her lists. "Medicine, instruments, blankets, more than I can afford." "Our money," he corrected gently. "What's mine is yours, even before the wedding." The ceremony itself was simple, held in the church on a crisp October morning. Nell wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. Cole stood tall in a new black suit, the scar from his wound hidden but not forgotten. Reverend Crane, much humbled by recent events, performed the service. "These two souls found each other in darkness," he said, "and chose to be each other's light. May their union inspire us all to choose love over fear, service over selfishness." Toppy attended with several of her people, bringing gifts of beaded moccasins and healing herbs. Buck stood as Cole's best man, tears unashamedly streaming down his weathered cheeks. Even Marshal Taggart stayed for the celebration, having become fond of the couple who'd helped crack his case. "To the bride and groom," Tommy Morrison called out at the reception, "and to healing hands and honest hearts." The toast echoed through the church hall, followed by fiddle music and dancing that lasted past midnight. For one perfect day, the community celebrated not just a wedding, but their collective liberation from fear. Reality returned with winter's first serious storm. The clinic, now operating from a donated building, filled with croupy children and frostbitten cowboys. Nell and Toppy worked 18-hour days, teaching mothers to make poultices, showing ranch hands how to treat minor wounds. Cole divided his time between helping at the clinic and organizing the return of stolen cattle, using Pike's own records. He identified rightful owners, mediated disputes, and ensured fair distribution. It was dangerous work. Hawkins had made threats but necessary. The crisis came in November. Young Sarah Chen, the shopkeeper's daughter, fell critically ill with pneumonia. Traditional treatments weren't working. As the child's breathing grew more labored, Nell felt the weight of the town's expectations. "They think I can work miracles," she confided to Cole, exhausted after another sleepless night. "But I'm just the woman who brought me back from death's door," he interrupted, "who united white medicine and crow wisdom to save half the children in town. Don't sell yourself short." Together with Toppy, they tried something new, a steam tent combining herbs from both traditions, careful percussion on the child's back to loosen congestion, and round-the-clock care. For 3 days, they fought for Sarah's life. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. Sarah opened her eyes, breathing clearly for the first time in a week. Her parents wept with relief, and word spread quickly the healing hands had triumphed again. "It's becoming a legend," Cole observed that evening. "The miracle worker of Montana Territory." Nell shook her head. "Legends are dangerous. They make people expect too much, forget that healing is hard work, not magic." But the legend grew despite her protests. Families traveled from neighboring towns seeking help. A newspaper in Helena ran a story, "Former Cowboys and Indians Unite to Heal Montana Town." The attention was overwhelming. December brought unexpected news. The territorial government, embarrassed by the Pike scandal, allocated funds for rural medical facilities. Nell's clinic would receive enough to hire assistants and expand services. We should build proper examination rooms, she planned excitedly. And quarters for patients who travel far. Oh, and a teaching space. We need to train more healers. Cole smiled at her enthusiasm. What happened to the woman who just wanted to survive alone on her homestead? She met a dying cowboy who reminded her that surviving isn't the same as living. Nell replied, kissing him soundly. Jake Hawkins made his move during the Christmas dance, while the town celebrated. His men struck at several small ranches. Trying to steal back cattle, Cole had returned. But Bradley, true to his word about doing better, had anticipated this. He'd organized a volunteer patrol that caught the rustlers red-handed. The confrontation at Pike's former ranch was brief but decisive. Faced with armed townspeople led by their reformed sheriff, Hawkins surrendered. The federal warrant for his arrest sealed his fate. It's really over, Tommy Morrison said, watching Hawkins led away in chains. Pike's kingdom is dead. Good riddance, Buck spat. Now maybe folks can build something worthwhile here. That building had already begun. The clinic expanded into a true hospital, with Toppy teaching herbal medicine alongside Nell's frontier doctoring. Cole established a horse ranch on land cleared of Pike's false claims, breeding sturdy mountain horses for the army. But progress came with a cost. The little boy Nell had saved from measles, Johnny Martinez, lost his battle with winter fever. She held his mother as she grieved, feeling the weight of every life she couldn't save. You can't save them all, Cole told her that night, holding her as she cried. But you save more than would survive without you. That matters. I know, she whispered, but knowing doesn't make it easier. No, he agreed. It shouldn't be easy. Caring means hurting sometimes. But it also means... He gestured toward the window, where lanterns glowed in houses throughout town. It means all this community, hope, future. Spring arrived with dramatic flooding as snow melted too fast. The creek jumped its banks, threatening the clinic. The whole town turned out to sandbag, working through the night. Former pikemen labored alongside those they'd once terrorized. Toppy's people worked beside townspeople who'd once shunned them. When dawn broke over muddy but intact buildings, Reverend Crane offered a prayer of thanksgiving for teaching us that we're stronger together than afraid alone. Sheriff Bradley, re-elected by a landslide, organized the cleanup. The flood had washed away the last physical remnants of Pike's reign-old wanted posters, signs marking his property, the gaudy painted lady statue from his saloon. Fresh start, he declared. Time to build the town we want to be. That town was taking shape. The school expanded. With classes in both English and Crow, the clinic served anyone who needed help, regardless of ability to pay. Cole's ranch employed former outlaws alongside veteran cowboys, giving second chances to those who'd earned them. One evening, as Nell updated patient records by lamplight, she felt Cole's hands on her shoulders. Remember what you wrote on day 30? He asked. That you were ready to see what came next. I remember, she said, leaning back against him. Did you imagine this all we've built? She turned to face him, seeing in his eyes the same wonder she felt. I imagined you healthy. Everything else. She gestured at the clinic, the town beyond, the life they'd created. This is beyond what I dared dream. We're not done, Cole said. There's still injustice to fight. People to heal, bridges to build between communities. I know, Nell agreed. But we've made a good start. Outside, the Montana sky stretched endless and star-filled. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, not threatening now, just part of the wild tapestry they'd learned to live within. The frontier was still hard, still dangerous, but no longer hopeless. In the morning, there would be patients to tend, horses to train, a community to nurture. But tonight, two people who'd found each other in the valley of death's shadow stood together, grateful for the journey that had brought them here. The healing that began with 30 days of desperate care had rippled outward, touching hundreds of lives, and it would continue, as long as there were hands willing to help and hearts brave enough to hope. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, the prairie exploded with color. Purple pasque flowers pushed through the last snow, followed by waves of yellow arrowleaf and blue lupine. The land seemed to celebrate its freedom from Pike's shadow, blooming with renewed vigor. The clinic had evolved into a proper medical facility. A wooden sign hung above the door, Heart Archer Healing House, all welcome. Inside, the main room served as both waiting area and classroom, where Nell and Toppy taught basic medicine to anyone willing to learn. Clean water, clean hands, clean wounds. Nell repeated to her latest group of students, ranch wives eager to tend their families better. These 3 things will save more lives than all the medicines combined. Cole had expanded his horse operation, but his proudest achievement stood in the paddock behind the clinic, a gentle mare trained to carry injured patients who couldn't walk. He'd spent weeks teaching her to kneel on command, to stand steady while wounded men were loaded. Every life we save justifies the effort, he told Buck, who'd become his foreman. Remember how you brought me to Nell? Not everyone has friends willing to ride through hell for them. The proposal for the community school came from unexpected quarters. Mrs. Chen, emboldened by her daughter's recovery, suggested teaching all children together white, Chinese, Native American, Mexican. We all live here, she argued at the town meeting. Our children play together. Why not learn together? Opposition was fierce initially. Old prejudices died hard. But when Toppy offered to teach traditional skills alongside regular subjects, and when Cole pledged horses for students who lived far out, resistance began to crumble. Times are changing, Sheriff Bradley observed. We can change with them or get left behind. The wedding that truly marked the town's transformation was between Tommy Morrison and Maria Rodriguez, the baker's daughter. A white cowboy and a Mexican girl. Such unions had happened before, but rarely so publicly celebrated. Nell helped Maria with her dress, a blend of American and Mexican traditions. Love doesn't see borders, Maria said, eyes shining. Tommy sees me, not where I come from. The ceremony filled the church, overflowing into the street. Toppy's people drummed wedding songs alongside Mexican guitars and frontier fiddles. It was joyous chaos, cultures mixing like streams joining a river. But darkness still lurked at the edges. Word came that some of Pike's men had regrouped in Wyoming, led by his former enforcer, Wade Garrison. They'd turned to simple banditry, hitting stage lines and isolated ranches. They blame us for Pike's fall, Cole said, reading the marshal's warning. Might come looking for payback. Nell's hand moved unconsciously to her belly, where new life grew a secret she hadn't yet shared. Let them come. This town has faced worse. The attack came on a quiet Tuesday. Nell was treating a broken arm when shots rang out. Through the window, she saw 5 riders thundering down Main Street, guns blazing. Everyone down, Cole shouted, bursting through the door. He'd been at the feed store when the shooting started. Glass shattered as bullets struck the windows. The patient, a young miner, cowered behind the examination table. Nell grabbed her medical bag, already calculating what injuries she might face. But the town had learned from Pike's reign. Shop owners had rifles ready. Sheriff Bradley's volunteers responded swiftly. The raiders, expecting easy prey, found themselves in a real fight. Cole joined the defense, his shots careful and measured. From the hotel, Buck's rifle boomed. Even misses. Chen appeared in her doorway with an ancient shotgun. The battle was brief but fierce. When the smoke cleared, 2 raiders lay dead, 2 wounded, and Garrison himself captured, bleeding from a shoulder wound. Bring him here, Nell ordered, despite angry protests. We treat everyone. As she worked on Garrison's shoulder, he sneered. Playing angel won't change nothing. You killed a great man. Pike built this territory. Pike built nothing but fear, she replied calmly, extracting the bullet. What we're building will last because it's founded on trust, not terror. Later, as Garrison was led to jail, Cole found Nell sitting quietly in their garden. "You all right?" She took his hand, placed it on her belly. "We're fine, both of us." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Nell, are you—" 3 months along. I think I wanted to be sure before—" She couldn't finish as he swept her into his arms, laughing and crying simultaneously. "A baby," he marveled. "Our baby." "Due in autumn," she confirmed, "when the healing time ends and harvest begins." The news spread quickly, adding to the town's sense of renewal. Gifts appeared: daily blankets, tiny moccasins, hand-carved toys. The women organized a quilting bee, creating a blanket that incorporated fabrics from every family. Each piece tells a story. "Elderly Mrs." Patterson explained, pointing to different squares. "This from Maria's wedding dress, this from the shirt Tommy wore when he testified, this from the curtains that hung in the old jail. All our stories, stitched together." Summer brought challenges. Drought threatened crops, and tempers flared over water rights. The old ways would have meant violence, but the new town found different solutions. Cole organized work parties to dig irrigation channels. Nell and Toppy identified drought-resistant medicinal plants. The school children learned water conservation from Crow elders who'd survived many dry seasons. "Community means sharing hardship, too," Reverend Crane preached. His transformation complete, not just celebration, but sacrifice. The birth approached as leaves turned gold. Nell trained her assistants intensively, knowing she'd need help when her time came. The irony wasn't lost on her, the healer needing healing. "Promise me," she told Toppy. "If something goes wrong—" "Nothing go wrong," Toppy interrupted firmly. "You strong, baby strong. But yes, I promise to care for you as you cared for others." Cole fretted constantly, driving everyone to distraction. Buck finally banned him from the clinic during Nell's final week. "You're making everyone nervous, boss. Go train horses or something." Labor began during the harvest moon. Cole paced outside while Toppy and Mrs. Rodriguez attended Nell. Her cries echoed through the night, each one twisting his heart. "First babies take time," Mrs. Patterson assured him, but he saw the concern in her eyes as hours passed. Dawn was breaking when a new cry joined Nell's high. Indignant, perfectly healthy. Cole burst in to find Nell holding a tiny bundle, exhausted but radiant. "Your son," she whispered, "perfect in every way." The baby had Cole's gray eyes and Nell's determined chin. As Cole held him for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "Hello, little one. I'm your papa. I promise to teach you everything: how to ride, how to track, how to be brave like your mama." "What shall we name him?" Nell asked. Cole thought of all they'd lost and found. "Samuel. It means God has heard, because our prayers were answered when we found each other." Samuel Hard Archer's first months coincided with the town's continued growth. The federal government, impressed by the community's progress, designated it a territorial model for integration and development. Dignitaries visited, amazed to find white and Native American children learning together, Mexican and Chinese families running businesses, former outlaws working alongside lawmen. "How do you do it?" a territorial administrator asked Nell as she showed him the clinic. She shifted Samuel to her other hip, considering. "We decided that fear was more expensive than trust, that healing works better than hurting. Simple as that." But implementation was never simple. When a new family arrived, freed slaves from Texas seeking a fresh start, some townsfolk balked. Old prejudices bubbled up like poison from a lanced wound. Cole stood firm at the town meeting. "The Washingtons stay. They're willing to work, to contribute. That's all we should care about." Easy for you to say. Someone called out, "You already broke all the rules, marrying the medicine woman, hiring Indians and Mexicans. And look where it's gotten us." Sheriff Bradley interrupted. "Prosperity, peace, pride in our town. I say we keep breaking the old rules and making better ones." The vote was close but positive. The Washingtons stayed, opening a smithy that soon became essential to the growing town. Winter arrived with unusual ferocity. Blizzards isolated the town for weeks. The clinic overflowed with frostbite cases and winter ailments. Samuel grew despite the chaos, a happy baby who rarely cried. "He knows he's safe," Toppy observed, watching him sleep through a particularly noisy emergency. Surrounded by love and purpose. One frozen night, a desperate pounding woke them. Cole opened the door to find a Crow warrior supporting a pregnant woman in distress. "Please," the man gasped in English. "Baby coming wrong. Medicine woman at camp sick too. No one else." "Bring her in," Nell ordered, already moving. "Cole, stoke the fire. Hot water, clean cloths." The delivery was complicated breech presentation in a first-time mother. Nell worked by lamplight, hands sure despite exhaustion, talking the terrified girl through each contraction. "You're strong," she murmured in the Crow words Toppy had taught her. "Your baby is strong. We do this together." Hours later, a healthy girl entered the world feet first but breathing. The parents wept with relief and gratitude. "You saved my family," the warrior said. "My name is Joseph Plentycoos. This debt—" "No debt," Nell interrupted gently. "Only neighbors helping neighbors." Word of the birth spread through both communities. More Crow began coming to the clinic, trusting the woman who'd saved one of their own in a blizzard. The integration Nell had dreamed of was happening naturally, one life at a time. Spring's return brought a letter that changed everything. The territorial governor wanted to establish a formal medical college in Helena, with satellite training programs in model communities. "They want you to direct the rural program," Cole said, reading over her shoulder. "Train doctors and nurses to serve frontier communities." Nell bounced Samuel on her knee, thinking it would mean travel, time away from home, but it would also mean spreading their methods wider, teaching others what she'd learned from both traditions. "We'd have to hire more help here," she mused. "And I'd need to formalize the curriculum with Toppy. So you'll do it." She looked around the clinic at the examination rooms that had replaced her parents' cabin, at the medicine shelves combining herbs and modern drugs, at the waiting room where Crow and White, Mexican and Chinese sat together. "Yes," she decided, "because healing one person at a time isn't enough anymore. We need to heal the whole territory's approach to medicine, to community, to each other." That night, as Samuel slept between them, Cole and Nell talked about the future, not just their family's future, but the territory's transformation from lawless frontier to something better. "Remember that first night?" Cole asked. "When Buck brought me here more dead than alive?" "Every detail," Nell confirmed. "You were so pale, barely breathing. You thought I'd die, but you fought for me anyway. 30 days of fighting." He kissed her forehead. "Now look what those 30 days have grown into." She smiled in the darkness. "A life, a family, a community. Not bad for a woman alone and a dying cowboy." "Not bad at all," he agreed. "And we're just getting started." Outside, the spring rain fell soft on the prairie, nourishing new growth. In the town that fear had once ruled, hope had taken root and flourished. The healing that began with 2 people had spread like ripples on a pond, touching shores they'd never imagined. Another summer passed, painting the grassland golden beneath the vast Montana sky. The drought had returned, worse than before, turning water into currency more precious than gold. The creek behind Nell's clinic dropped to a trickle, and the communal well showed signs of stress. "We need to think bigger," Cole said at the emergency town meeting. "Individual solutions won't work anymore. This whole valley needs a water management plan." The idea was ambitious, a series of retention ponds and irrigation channels that would require every able-bodied person working together. Some balked at the scope, but when Toppy's people offered their ancestral knowledge of water conservation, momentum built. My grandfather knew where springs hide. Joseph Plentycoos explained, drawing maps in the dust. Where to dig when the world goes dry, this knowledge we share. The project became a testament to how far they'd come. Former enemies worked side by side under the brutal sun. Mrs. Chen organized meal rotations to feed the workers. The school children carried water to the diggers, learning lessons no book could teach. Nell, despite Cole's protests, insisted on taking shifts at the dig sites. I can't ask others to do what I won't, she said, tying Samuel to her back native style. The baby seemed to enjoy the activity, gurgling happily at passing workers. One scorching afternoon, tragedy struck. Young William Washington, son of the blacksmith family, collapsed from heat exhaustion. By the time they carried him to the clinic, his temperature was dangerously high. Nell worked frantically, packing him in wet sheets, forcing water past his unconscious lips. The whole town seemed to hold its breath as she and Toppy fought for the boy's life. Please, his mother whispered, clutching Nell's hand. He's all we got left. His brother didn't survive the journey here. For 2 days, William hovered between life and death. Nell barely left his side, monitoring his temperature, adjusting treatments. Cole brought Samuel to nurse, understanding she couldn't abandon her patient. On the 3rd dawn, William's fever broke. His eyes opened, focused and clear. Mama, he whispered. The celebration when he walked out of the clinic a week later rivaled any holiday. The Washingtons, once viewed with suspicion, were now woven into the community's fabric through shared fear and relief. That's how it happens, Reverend Crane observed to Cole. Not through preaching or policy, but through crisis and care. Hearts change when hands work together. The water project succeeded just as autumn arrived. The first test came with September rains, usually brief but intense. The new channels captured and directed the water into holding ponds, securing reserves for the dry months ahead. But success brought new challenges. Word of the thriving integrated community spread, drawing both admirers and detractors. A group of journalists arrived from Eastern newspapers, eager to document the experiment in frontier unity. We're not an experiment, Nell told them firmly as they toured the clinic. We're people who decided survival mattered more than separation. It's not complicated. One journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Prescott, pressed further. But surely there are tensions traditional hierarchies disrupted. Cole stepped forward. Ma'am, when you're bleeding out from a bullet wound, you don't care what color the hands are that save you. When your child's burning with fever, you're grateful for any knowledge that helps. That's our hierarchy, competence and compassion over everything else. The articles that eventually ran were mixed. Some praised the town as a model for American progress. Others warned against the dangerous mixing of races and cultures. But locally, the outside opinions mattered less than daily reality. That reality included joy alongside struggle. Buck, confirmed bachelor for 60 years, shocked everyone by courting Mrs. Patterson. Their wedding that October featured the most unlikely collection of attendees, cowboys and shopkeepers, native warriors and Mexican farmers, all celebrating love's ability to surprise. Never thought I'd see the day, Buck admitted to Cole, adjusting his new collar awkwardly. But that woman makes me want to be better than I am. Ain't that what love does? Winter arrived early and harsh. The first blizzard caught a traveling medicine show unprepared. Their wagon overturned in a gulch, leaving the performers stranded and injured. The rescue effort mobilized the entire town. Cole led riders into the storm, while Nell prepared the clinic for casualties. They found the troupe near frozen, a collection of misfits, including a Chinese acrobat, an Irish strongman, a Mexican fortune-teller, and a black pianist from New Orleans. Quite a family you've collected, Nell observed as she treated their frostbite and injuries. Families, whoever stands by you. The troop's leader, a scarred woman named Delilah, replied, "Seems you folks understand that." As the performers recovered, they entertained the town with their skills. The pianist, Augustus, played in the church, his music bridging gaps words couldn't cross. The acrobat taught children tumbling tricks, even the fortune teller, admitting her powers were just keen observation, helped in the clinic. Maybe we'll winter here, Delilah mused, watching the easy integration. If you'll have us. Anyone willing to contribute is welcome. Sheriff Bradley confirmed. That's our only law now. Spring brought 2 arrivals that bookended the town's journey. First came a federal inspection team, sent to evaluate the medical training program Nell had established. They expected to find a primitive operation, but discovered something far more sophisticated. Your integration of traditional and modern medicine is remarkable, the lead inspector admitted. These student records show outcomes matching Eastern hospitals. Better in some ways, Nell replied, showing them mortality statistics. Because we treat the whole person, not just symptoms, and we prevent problems through community health education. The second arrival was more personal. A weathered rider appeared at Cole's ranch, leading a familiar horse. It was Ethan's mare, Cole's brother's horse, missing since that long-ago Texas range war. Found her way to our ranch in Amarillo. The rider explained, "Saw your brand, remembered stories about a Cole archer up Montana way. Figured you'd want her back." Cole's hands shook as he touched the mare's graying muzzle. She nickered softly. Remembering him despite the years, that night, he told Samuel about his Uncle Ethan, about loss and redemption, about how broken things sometimes find their way home. The town gathered for an unexpected celebration, the dedication of the new schoolhouse, built with funds from the territorial government. It was the largest building in town, with real glass windows and a bell tower. "Education is the future, Mrs." Chen declared at the ceremony. She'd been elected school board president, another barrier broken. "Our children will read and write in multiple languages. They'll know mathematics and music, science and stories from many traditions." As if to underscore the point, the first class performed a song verses in English, Crow, Spanish, and Chinese, harmonizing despite the linguistic differences. Parents wept openly at the sound of their children's voices weaving together. But the most profound moment came when old Joseph Plentycoo stood to speak. "Once, I thought white men brought only death to our people. Then I met some who brought healing instead. This woman," he gestured to Nell, "and this man," indicating Cole, "showed me another way is possible. Not easy, not perfect, but possible." That night, as rain began to fall, the steady, soaking rain that promised good grass and full streams, Nell and Cole sat on their porch with Samuel toddling between them. Buck and Mrs. Patterson, now Mrs. Morrison sat nearby, along with Tommy and Maria, expecting their first child. "Remember when this was just a dying man and a desperate woman?" Buck mused. "Now look at us. Regular pillar of society." "Pillars are built stone by stone," Nell replied, catching Samuel before he tumbled. "Each choice, each act of trust, each hand extended across old divisions." Cole pulled out his brother's photograph, the one he'd carried through his darkest days. "Ethan would have loved this, a place where past sins don't define future possibilities, where people get second chances." "Everyone here got a second chance," Maria observed, hand on her growing belly. "The town itself got reborn when Pike fell." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rain on the roof. Lamplight spilled from windows throughout town and the clinic where Toppy was teaching night classes, the school where Augustus played piano for anyone who wanted to listen, the church where Reverend Crane had learned to preach unity instead of division. "What's next?" Tommy asked eventually. "Seems like we've built something pretty special here." "We maintain it," Nell said simply. "Day by day, choice by choice. We raise our children to see differences as strength, not weakness. We keep reaching out to those who need help. We remember that healing is an active verb, not a finished state. Cole nodded, adding, "And we prepare for the ones who'll come after us. This won't be the last town to face these choices. Others will look here for proof it can work." As if in response, Samuel spoke his first clear word, home. Everyone laughed, the sound mixing with the rain's rhythm. Yes, this was home, not just a place, but a living experiment in what America could become when fear gave way to fellowship. The stars emerged as clouds parted, wheeling overhead in their eternal dance. Somewhere in the darkness, coyotes called to each other across the vast prairie. But here, in the circle of lamplight, surrounded by chosen family, the frontier's dangers seemed distant. I should write this down. Catherine Prescott had told Nell before leaving. Your whole story, from those 30 days of healing to all of this. If you do, Nell had replied, make sure people understand it wasn't magic. It was work, hard, daily, sometimes heartbreaking work, but worth every moment. Now, as Samuel drowsed in Cole's arms and friends talked quietly of tomorrow's plans, Nell thought about those 30 days that started everything. How close they'd come to missing all of this if Cole had died, if she'd turned him away, if fear had won over compassion. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was addressing Cole, God, or the universe itself. "For what?" Cole asked softly. "For fighting to live, for giving me a reason to fight too, for all of this." He kissed her temple. "Thank you for not giving up on a dying cowboy, for seeing something worth saving." The rain continued, gentle now, blessing the earth with renewal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. But tonight, in a town built on healing and hope, two people who'd found each other in darkness rested in the light they'd helped create. The frontier would always be there, wild and dangerous at the edges. But here, in this small corner of Montana territory, they'd proven that civilization meant more than buildings and laws. It meant choosing to see the sacred in acts of care, the holy in hands extended across difference, the divine in the simple decision to help rather than harm. And so the story continued, not ending, but evolving, as all living things must. Each day brought new chances to choose compassion over comfort, community over isolation, hope over fear. The healing that began with 30 days of desperate care had become a way of life, rippling outward in ways Nell Hart could never have imagined when she opened her door to a dying stranger. But then, the most profound transformations often begin with the simplest acts of human kindness. And in a harsh land that tested every soul, such kindness became its own form of grace. Thank you for listening to this story. Dear friends, I'm curious to know where in the world you're enjoying this tale of the Wild West. Please share your location in the comments so we can connect across the miles. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more stories of frontier courage and redemption. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Nell and Cole's journey. What touched your heart? What surprised you? Share your reflections below. And let's keep the spirit of the Old West alive together.